Good listeners of Shop Talk Live, welcome to episode number 196. I'm going to keep this one short. I want to let everyone know that we are looking for pictures of toolboxes and tool chests to include in our Tools and Shop issue coming up. So if you've got a toolbox or a tool chest that you're particularly proud of, post it to Instagram or Facebook, I guess, using the hashtag HeyFWW. HEYFWW. And that will get you in the running to be included in our upcoming Tools and Shops issue. We're going to be doing a gallery of readers' tool storage. So if you've got a cool tool cabinet or tool chest, tool box, whatever, post a picture, hashtag HeyFWW. If you do that, you'll also be entered to win an unlimited membership. So Instagram, HeyFWW, with your pride and joy, your tool cabinet and tool chest that you've been working on forever, and it'll get you in the pages of Fine Woodworking, where every woodworker wants to be. All right, on with the show. You guys have anything woodworkery to talk about?
I just cleaned my shop. It took me 4 days to clean my shop.
4 days.
And it's not even clean. But
just walking in.
You just gave up after 4 days.
But it's clean. You know, because there's those, there's that cleaning where you just get in there, you get like the dust off the windowsills, you vacuum, you get all the cobwebs off. This wasn't one of those cleans. I had to like clean 4 days just to get to the point where the next time I clean, I might be able to go to the next level.
Because how many classes have you done now? Like how many props and...
This is like coming to the tail end of my summer schedule where I have one more week-long class. So everything for the last probably 5 months has just been make a mess, go teach. Come back, make a mess, go teach. And it's just keep building and building and building until I had no place to walk in my shop. But now I do.
I know your dust collection scene is a broom.
It's a red broom that hangs behind a bookcase? The entertainment center.
What's your dust? I mean, you have a small dust collector, but are you the type of person who is making sure it's hooked up and running all the time? And because when we used to have the shop down the road, the dust collector was strong enough that you really didn't have to worry about cleaning up anything outside of what wound up on the tabletop or something like that.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden I'm back to with no dust collector, and it's just like, oh, this is awful. There's dust everywhere all the time.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the chippage, not so much the dust. But I have a dust collector, which I like. That's hooked up to my table saw and my planer.
Okay.
It's big chips. Then I have sort of a dedicated shop vac that looked like it was made in Czechoslovakia in 1967, hooked up to my bandsaw. It's like giant and loud, and you put your hand over like the hose, and you can barely feel anything. So I think it just doesn't work. But every now and then it really doesn't work, and I lift it off, and the thing is completely impacted. It's like you're making ice cream with all the the layers of the sunset in there. So it does work. So I got a separate thing for my bandsaw. I've got a dedicated on-off shop vac for my chop saw, which is really good. And my jointer, it's a wooden box at the bottom of the chute. And that's the one where...
I think Tetra has that model.
Yeah, and that's the one, if I'm really going, you just move the box out of the way so the pile can clear and it doesn't keep shooting up through the cutter head.
Yeah,
as we're cutting. Yeah. And that pile just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So... so I mean, overall, it's pretty good. I would like to get, on one hand, I'd like to get the joiner hooked up to dust collector. On the other hand, I feel like I'm emptying the dust bag often enough to where I don't want to add a jointer's worth of chips in there as well, because I just think I'd be emptying that thing like 2 or 3 times for every milling process.
Mm-hmm.
Did the chips follow you into the house?
I've given up on even brushing them off at this point.
They're all in my bed. And granted, my shop is right next to my bedroom, but I'm like, curl up in bed feeling all good. It's like, what is scratching me?
That would be really bad.
It's shavings, wood chips. Yeah.
There are some members of my family who complain of finding splinters in their underwear.
Show title, Splinters in My Underwear. I've got to do something with dust collection. I had 2 shop vacs. One that was set up to go between my bandsaw and my lathe area.
Yeah.
And then just a general shop vac. Oh, and the planer got hooked up to the first one as well. That one died.
Wow.
And now I'm left. It's a nice dust extractor. I've got, my Festool dust extractor, but it's not cutting it for everywhere. And I need to do something. But it's like the least sexy thing to spend money on.
Yeah. It's hard. And then if you want a good
You get
dust
no
collector,
enjoyment out of it.
then you have to go up to like, $220 for like a good one. And that means I have to add another breaker to my breaker box.
You're full.
And then no, I can't do that.
Yeah, it's like you're paying for the lack of unenjoyment. Like there's no pleasure derived from it. It's just less pain.
Yeah. Actually, the biggest thing for me in dust collector won't solve it are like the scraps. I can't throw this away. But now I burn everything. So it's like, well, I have to collect it and cut it to length, put it in a box. But I've done that so much, I have boxes of kindling all over. So now I have a complete trash can on the rolly things with kindling. I just bought a second trash can completely filled up. And I don't know if you do this, but I cut my kindling to exact length. And I actually throw
do it before
away,
I go in the house with it.
I throw away the little nubs that are too short because it's like, no, I need like perfectly sized length kindling because it stacks really well, and whatever I'm stacking it burns well.
The shoulder to shoulder is crucial. Otherwise, that fire ends up all out of square.
I mean, within an inch. I mean, I'm not like insane. But
You're not setting up a stop block.
So you know how when we lost 191, the old shop, everyone kind of like got in that last project. Do you know what Anissa's was? Taking all that scrap and turning it into kindling.
That's right. Yeah. I just keep one of those big, black plastic totes that you buy when you're moving or something, and I keep one of those under the wing of my table saw.
Oh yeah.
And everything just gets thrown in there, and it's open enough that you can go digging in there easily, looking for a cutoff or
the false promise of a scrap. But
I need a thing a 1/4 inch thick. Oh, is it in there? It's. But the way that I'm working now is I'm not generating nearly as much scrap as you. So
too much.
All right, let's answer a question, or 3 or 4. All right, this first one is from Chase. Excuse me. I have an old 13-inch Hitachi planer I got from Craigslist many years ago. It has served me well, but it's starting to have issues. 13 inches has been useful, but at times I wish it was wider. In your experience, is it worth the extra money to buy something bigger, or should I stick with a more reasonable choice like a DeWalt DW735? I have 220-volt access and floor space, so that isn't an issue. I'm in my 30s. I've been woodworking for 10 years. I would like to keep working into my 80s so I can justify a longer-term investment. I can afford $1.5 to $2K, but could buy something else if I stuck with a cheaper planer. So he's got the right budget.
Trying not to dislike Chase. It's all good. You're in your 30s and you got $2,000 to blow on a planer. You're doing well, my friend. That's all.
I don't know what choices you've made, but they are not my choices.
It's a really good question. I've owned a 13-inch DeWalt planer forever.
And you bought it in your 30s, right?
20s? Okay, I did 20, so. All right, fair enough. But it's like bomb-proof. It's this big cast iron beast, and I really liked it. And it had regular cutter, just a regular, 3-knife cutter head with the straight knives, which were always a pain to change. And we had a Powermatic 15 with a segmented cutter head in the shop that I was using back when we had a shop, and it was fantastic. I mean, I think the segmented cutter head in a planer is a game changer.
You're a liar.
I don't think that in that big Powermatic,
those are straight knives.
No, I'm talking. We had one in for a tool review. We were doing 15-inch planers.
Okay,
man,
that'd be nice.
I could be the owner of that planer, except it was a kind of out of my budget, but who cares? That wouldn't have stopped me. But Anissa wanted that planer too, and she was like leaving, and she kind of played the pity card. It's like, oh,
this is her first stint at the magazine.
So.
Yeah. Nobody freak out. Lisa's not leaving.
Yeah, no. But it was kind of like, wow, yeah, go, it would be nice since I'm leaving. It's like, darn it. So I let that go. Plus, I also got the bandsaw I wanted earlier on. So I was okay. Anyway.
So question. Are you going 15-inch straight knives or 13 with the helical head? Because I was thinking getting that DeWalt and dropping a helical head in it, because I think...
Oh, man, that's a good...
13-inch?
Yeah, the one that he mentions. It's like that reliable one that everyone has if they have a lunchbox.
I mean, I don't know anymore. A lot of the smaller planers are available with segmented cutter heads now. I might have to look and see what's available. So basically, I was looking at either keeping my 13-inch, which I really like, and putting a segmented cutter head in it, or moving up to the 15. I ended up putting a segmented cutter head in my 13-inch planer because I really liked it. And also my shop is really small. So even just going from the 13 to the 15 and the bigger in-feed, out-feed table, it would have just messed with my shop mojo too much. But I think at the time the Grizzly 15-inch segmented cutter head was around 1900.
It's give or take, you're around 1800 now.
Yeah.
For their new 0891, which is really sweet looking.
Segmented cutter head, 15-inch.
Segmented. Yeah. I honestly, I went to the Grizzly page and I think I even just unclicked straight knife. Because if you're going to buy a 15-inch planer, don't even bother.
Yeah, don't be stuck with that the rest of your 80 or woodworking career.
But that's a really good point, because like a DeWalt 735 is $600.
Mm-hmm.
Rikon has a segmented cutter head for a 13-inch with segmented for $700.
Wait, for just the head?
No, the planer.
Okay. I was like, wait a second.
So, I mean, the DeWalt bomb-proof, that's a great planer.
It's a great planer, and the disposable knives make it easier to change out.
Yeah.
And when they're sharp, I think when any knife is sharp, they all work almost equally well. It's just that my planer knives were never sharp, but my segmented cutter head. So yeah, I kept the 13 and went with the segmented cutter head just because I like my planer. If I had a lunchbox 13, I wouldn't stick a cutter head in it. I'd probably get a bigger planer if I could afford it.
I can't believe your planer's 13 inches because we moved that and that was 5,000 pounds. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, that was the Delta Rockwell RC33, which is a classic planer. They made them in Brazil. And I think it weighs like 450 pounds. But super planers, if you can get one, I think you can pick them up for, I want to say maybe $300 or $400. You keep your eye out for
How much was the cutter head?
$900. Plus, I had him install it because this planer was like 30 years old. And this is the thing, he cracked it open. He said, man, that thing it's built like a sewing machine. It's just tight in there. All the gears and everything, they're all metal gears. He said it was in such good condition and that made me feel good. Because I was like paying him a lot of money to like tune it up. So I think overall it was like, yeah, see, that was tough. You put a segmented cutter head in there. I think it was $1,200 or $1,300 just to stick a new head in an old planer. But I liked it.
Yeah, it's your old planer.
Right.
It's not just some old planer.
But I could have taken that, say $1,300, sold the planer for $400. That's $1,700.
Got a 15-inch.
It was almost a 15-inch Grizzly segmented. So I don't know. It's really, really close. But I would, if you can spring for it, segmented cutter head is fantastic. I mean, almost zero tear out. I work with tons of white oak, and I never have a problem with it. A lot of curly cherry, never have a problem with it. Tiger maple, just run it through.
It's amazing.
What would you do?
What are my options? Would I do the 15 or... I'd probably get the smaller one. But I don't know the rest of his tooling. That popped into my head. It's like,
yeah, exactly.
Because he said I could go cheaper on the planer and get another tool. It's like, well, what else do you need, dude? Because
but size-wise, though, a jump between a 13 and 15, like as soon as you get a 15-inch planer, you're going to have a 16-inch board you want to plane. Like, it's never going to solve the problem.
And 15 is nice. Get a 20-inch planer.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of my head.
I think I would live with a 13-inch with a helical head for a long time before I jumped up. And if I did, I'd probably go 20-inch. Although I was trying to talk myself into buying that 15-inch Grizzly a while back, but I just don't have the room for it, or the money, actually. But
yeah, I think I would. And even if you can tune up the 13 Hitachi that you have and drop a helical head in, if you want to make it really sweet for the time being, and save up your pennies for the 20.
But a helical head's like $600.
Yeah, fair. Okay.
That is definitely not an answered question.
No.
It's if there's a large hole in your machinery needs, stick with the DW735.
Yeah.
And get whatever else you need.
I'm with you. Yeah, so
At some point, you're going to want a different planer, though.
you mean bigger, different?
Well, he's got 50 years.
Quieter. Holy cow.
There is
man.
no noise. You're talking helical head specifically, or
I'm talking about
this old dude,
the DeWalt, the bench lunchbox planers with the little
noisy.
Yeah, all those that type of motor, super super loud. You go up to a bigger planer with the regular motor. What is that called?
not the universal? Right?
Not the universal.
Yeah.
The other one. Quieter. Oh, and then you throw a segment cutter head on that. You can't even hear it. It's amazing.
Now, if you don't have a dust collector, the DW735 makes sense because it's got the blower.
That's right.
To get rid of chips. So it's
a great planer.
It's a great planer,
Yeah.
but it sounds like it might be time for 15-inch segment and cutter head.
Yeah, because Chase, if you're saying if you got $1.5 or $2,000, you got more than that.
That's a really good
Chase,
point.
you should try having lunch with Mike all the time. You got it. You should buy that. Just buy it. Nobody cares. All right. Question number 2 is from Martin. I know Mike likes to have a small offset between the rails and stiles of his frame and panel doors. But how does he avoid chipping the unsupported inside corners of the stiles when planing the top and bottom to fit the door opening?
That is a fantastic question, and I don't know. I
was trying to remember. I think you hand planed them, didn't you, when we made that video?
I do the main door trimming like on the ends of the door at the table saw with the little shims to square it up. So if I'm using a table saw, one thing you can do is raise the blade up a little bit higher so it's cutting on the downstroke. You'll kind of minimize that. I don't know. I mean, they're only offset by maybe a skinny 1/16 of an inch, so there isn't a lot of stock sticking up above the rail to chip out. Sharp blade, maybe raise it up a little bit. Hand plane, make sure it's sharp. I don't know. I haven't found. I mean, yeah, technically it's unsupported stock, and you will get chip out. I think I may have experienced it when I'm teaching, and some students have a little chippy thing, and I just pull it off real quick and say, "Yeah, don't worry about it. Get some sandpaper on there." But in reality, it doesn't present that much of a problem that often, to the point where I would need some sort of workaround.
What's the most surprising, or what's the place that people need to watch out for chip out, tear out most when hand planing? I have one that I know it's coming, and I always ignore it, and I always have a big chunk chip out.
Yeah.
That's when I am like using a shoulder plane on the end of a tenon.
Oh, you just bust off the corner?
Just bust off the corner, and then I'll glue it on, or I'll go, it's fine.
Yeah. That's a really good question. If it's a regular tenon that's just going down into a mortise, and who cares if you blow a corner off, no big deal. But if it's a through tenon and you break that corner off and then you stick it through there and you got that little missing corner as it protrudes, I actually changed my tenoning method just because of that. Because I would do it like maybe every fourth tenon, I would get like a little chip out on the corner. And it's it was enough to where it was mostly good. And when it happens, like, oh, darn, why'd that happen? And then you just sort of keep going. And then I think I was working on a commission, and I wanted everything to be like perfect. And I realized that my method kind of guaranteed I was going to have a blowout every fourth time for some reason. So what I do now is a lot of times I'll do the kind of the cheeks of the tenon, a lot of times with a dado blade with the stock flat, or I can do it vertically with a tenoning jig and a table saw blade. But I always do the little ends of the tenon at the bandsaw after I hit it with a shoulder plane to make sure it fits into the mortise.
Oh, so you fit the width of it and then trim the haunch off or whatever.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
So you get the thickness down, leave it full width as you're doing all that. So if you blow off a corner, who cares? And then trim it to its final width at the bandsaw, which I find does a really good job preventing blowout, knocking those corners off. Mm-hmm. It's funny how it's like, to prevent knocking this thing off one every 4 or 5 times, I had to completely change my methodology. That's the thing about woodworking. You think, if I just try harder, I'm not going to make that mistake, when a lot of times your processes tend to guarantee certain mistakes, and you have to, at some point, reassess your processes and back it up and maybe come at it from a different angle. So that's a good question.
Do you ever use, I know you've worked with Chris Gochner a lot. Do you ever use mineral spirits or anything when trimming end grain, like a frame and panel door or something?
On knots, I would. When I'm hand planing around knots, I would. I forget if I know I used water. I don't think I ever used mineral spirits because water's handier. I just throw it on there, and it works wonders. I couldn't believe it how well it worked. Just punch right through.
You know what I use on knots? Chop saw.
Get that sucker out
that
of
old
there.
scrap bit. But that's one way of hedging your bets a little bit more in your favor if you were hand planing a frame and panel door.
Yeah. Have you tried that?
Yeah. After we got back from Salt Lake City that time, I started, keeping a little squirt bottle of mineral spirits next to the shooting board.
Okay.
And then I left the lid off. and I haven't done it since. But that was just one of those habits. Chris Gochner he's a man of really, really good habits.
Yeah.
You can tell, like, when he goes to do something, he has a checklist in his brain, and he goes, do I have this? Do I have this? Mm-hmm. Do I have this? There. And one of them, every time he went to a shooting board to trim end grain or whatever, he just a quick wipe of mineral spirits, and it really does make a fairly significant difference.
I can't imagine him ever being in a rush during any part of the process of woodworking or ever losing patience. He just, like you said, he seems very in control.
I don't think I've seen him lose patience. I mean, we were doing a 2-week project in 1 week.
Yeah.
And he did have to rush a couple of things, or we'd come in there early in the morning and he's furiously sanding. But that was...
That's weird.
That's tough circumstances.
Video is not woodworking.
Yeah. But I mean, you can't take the corner off that unsupported piece with a chisel in advance.
I just wouldn't worry about it. Always have the outer face, the top face of the door, the show face, always have that up. I mean, you're just always going to get a cleaner cut on the top face anyway. So, I mean, that's the one thing I do all the time without exception. Whenever I'm trimming my doors, the door's always facing up. So if I do have any little tear out or chip out, it happens on that bottom face. So that might be one solution to that because it's going to help everything else.
Yeah. All right, a little insurance policy.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, should we move on to our all-time favorite tool of all time for this week?
Yeah.
Who wants to go first?
I got one, and you guys were talking about it maybe the last podcast or 2 podcasts ago. Sketchup. And
I knew you were going to say this.
I've been having some fun with it because it lets me play around with, colors. I wasn't sure about material selection. And I knew I wanted to paint something, but I wasn't sure where I wanted to paint it. So I was able to mock up this little bookcase thing Go, what if a red oak top and a shelf and pine sides? What if I paint that? What if this is pine and that's red? And I was able to check balance and with the color in a way where I was like, oh, I guess I could print all these out, and I have colored pencils. I could try that, but that I'm not John Tetro. So that wasn't going to happen. I'm not doing wood grain.
That's okay. Nobody is.
It's rough. All right. So as long as we're all in the same boat.
So you don't do like grain textures or anything on
SketchUp.
with
I
SketchUp.
do.
You do?
Yeah.
I've never gotten that far.
It was easier thanks to Dave Richards.
Yeah.
I can't even get rid of that guy standing there when you open up the file.
Just watching my project the whole time.
Somebody posted on Instagram the other day a story of like it was just the screen. I was like, click X, and I was like, yeah.
But also, it lets me catch mistakes before I end up cutting up wood.
How far do you go in drawing? Do you draw the little joinery and stuff?
Yeah, so stuff like tenons, I'll do them to size. Dovetails, no. I'll just go, I know I want dovetails there.
Yeah.
And that lets me see. So I was doing, I want to do the little, what do we call it? A dovetail divider? Well, Neptune's thing is
Yeah.
dovetail. And I want to do that. And I photographed that article and edited it, so I felt pretty in command of the content. But when I mocked up the project in SketchUp, I left the data behind the dovetail too big.
Oh.
And I was able to see that then instead of when I laid it out on the wood or, God forbid, even, did the data.
Yes.
And
that, I don't even know how many times doing something in SketchUp lets me catch the mistakes.
When I did the SketchUp for Gochner's Enfield cupboard, I sketched up the tapered sliding dovetails, and that was
Oh, man.
a nightmare. That was like that point where I was like, no, too far. You got to back this off.
Yeah, yeah.
But I do just about everything up to dovetails and tapered sliding dovetails. So,
Because rectangles are easy,
yeah.
So SketchUp.
That's cool. I wish I knew it well enough to where 99% of my energies weren't on just learning how to make this hole where I want it.
But you have Illustrator, right? Isn't that?
That's just a drawing program. It's just, you're just drawing it. It's not, you can't spin it around. It's not like a real thing.
Oh, okay.
So I'm just drawing in 2D. I like, I wish I knew SketchUp better. It's just so counterintuitive to me. It seems like I have to relearn it every time I use it.
That's the thing with curves. So there's a little cutout that I want to do at the bottom of the bookcase.
Uh-huh.
And I don't want it to be an exact curve. I want it to be kind of more bulbous on the outsides and flatter
Right.
on. I'm not mocking that up. SketchUp has a curve tool. I'm just putting that in there. And I know I want a curve there. So I'm not doing things that are 1 or 2 levels beyond the immediate buttons.
Well, you can get it close. And like you said, get the joinery close enough to know if you're going to run into trouble before you cut your stone.
Right, yeah.
It's really cool.
There was talking about that the discussion on the last podcast. There was somebody who had written in to say that SketchUp can work with CAD or can work with CNC programs and can do parametric sizing, things like that. But it's SketchUp Pro. So
and that's expensive.
I meant to include it in this episode, but I don't have it in my notes right now. But yes, you are right. It can. Pro is expensive though. Freebie to freebie. You cannot do parametric sizing with SketchUp.
How much is SketchUp Pro? It's not that much, is it?
It's $700.
I would have said 4 or 5.
Okay.
And it's also, they might be moving to an annual thing where it might be like 3 or 4 a year. So
Wow. Okay.
And the cut list extension on SketchUp. I forgot about that. You get all your parts and the sizes. So I can take that to the lumberyard and I know makes my life easy.
Cool.
When I was like working exclusively in plywood, that's what.
Oh yeah, because it lays it out on.
Yeah, it lays it out on a piece of plywood. It really doesn't take grain direction into account, but at that point, I really didn't care about grain direction either. So, but yeah, that is handy.
What you got, Mike?
Japanese little dovetail saws from a company called Suizan, Suizan, available on Amazon. Was going to be my favorite tool of all time. I just remembered. No, actually, they're really good Japanese saws. They're super, super close to a saw Nakaya 210C, which was available from Tools from Japan, which is no longer selling things. And Matt Kinney and I both love that saw. And he came across this brand of saw on Amazon, and it's super, super close. It's almost identical to that saw. So it comes in two sizes. I mean, a bunch of sizes, but they have an 8.5 super fine tooth saw, which is the nicest saw I've ever used. I use it for Kumiko. Super, super thin curve, super fine teeth. It's really, really fun to use, but the teeth are really fragile. So I have like 3 extra blades for that saw because they just pop off like corn kernels.
even with like basswood or pine?
They somehow get knocked off. And my saws tend to get used by students now and then, so I'm not blaming anybody. But then they also have a saw, a 6-inch saw, which is shorter. It's beefier. It's got a shorter handle and shorter blades. So for me, I really like it. I got it kind of as a travel saw because I got in trouble from a lot of people for cutting the handle off my other Japanese saw. So I thought, well, here, this one's starting short. You can't get mad at me because I bought it this way. But it also turned out to have
the factory cut it shorter.
It's a little heavier plate and makes a little thicker curve, so it's a little bit beefier. I think it's like a little more durable. And it has like a wider blade, so I can take a deeper cut. That's kind of cool. That's my new sort of go-to utility Japanese saw, and then I save my fine one for just super fine stuff. So, but my real favorite tool of all time of the week. Did I say this before? Did I mention my new dowel plate?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
good.
you had just gotten it, so it might have been preemptive.
Oh. Was it favorite tool of all time?
No, I think it was a recommendation.
Okay. Well, favorite tool. A company called DFM. It's a small company in the U.S. doing a couple things like some squares and scrapers, but they also came out with a dowel plate with 1 billion holes from 1/8 of an inch, I think, to either 1/2 inch in 1/32 increments, which is amazing because, like 3/16 used to be my favorite. It could be 7/32.
I feel like you've changed. And I don't know how I feel about you using 30 seconds all of a sudden.
See. It works really well. I mean, how does a dowel plate not work? It's just a steel plate with a bunch of holes drilled in it. It works really well. It's got 1 billion holes, and the price is about the same. I think it's less than the other dowel plate on the market you can buy. So it's a really good price, 1 billion holes, and a really good product.
Cool.
Have you ever tried making your own dowel plate?
Yeah.
Did it work?
I think it got the job done.
Because it's tapered on the back. So what do? Drill a straight hole, then sort of ream it out from the backside to open it up?
No, you just drive it through a tapered hole, and you just have to poke it out. Like the piece of wood just sticks in it, and you just...
Oh, so it's not a tapered hole, just a straight hole.
The one that I did, yeah.
Some people take like a piece of angle iron and just like spin it through there with a drill or something.
That's what I did. Yeah.
Oh, so you did the drill method. Because I made a dowel plate in like a piece of 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch steel twice. Worked neither time. But my dowel plate works like a champ.
Huh.
It didn't round a piece of wood as you drove it through?
Split every time.
Really?
Every time. It was, and I have no idea why. And I would do the same process. I do the same process now with my real dowel plate, like from a different person. And it works fantastically. So I was wondering if there's like dowel plate dust that gets sprinkled on these things before they go leave the factory.
The tapering maybe, but
But they're not tapered the whole length, right?
I don't know.
I feel like they are close to it, but
The hole at the top where it meets the top surface has to be pretty true. Can't be rounded over or beveled or anything. I mean, that's the cutting surface right there is where that hole meets the surface. Some of my students were using this dowel plate. What they liked about it is I always put like a real heavy chamfer on my dowel stock before I drive it through, so I'm removing as little of the stock as possible by the time I get to my final diameter. And some students had a lot of luck because they're 30-second difference holes and there's a bunch. They'll just start at a bigger hole and kind of keep going down until they get to their final dimension. But either way, when you're making your dowel stock, here's my recommendation. I'll give it to you now, not at the end. Cut your dowel stock exactly to size. Don't over it. So if you're doing 1/4-inch dowels, cut it exactly a 1/4-inch square. Don't fudge it heavier thinking that's a good idea, because it just makes it horrible to try to pound through a dowel plate.
Because you're peeling wood off the whole.
Yeah, you got the whole thing going. But if you can get exactly, and then the thing is, well, if it's exactly a 1/4, going to end up with a flat. You kind of do anyway, but it's never really an issue because it tends to fit the hole really well, and those flats don't really translate to the end grain surface, the surface of your piece of furniture. I've never had a flat big enough to where you look at it and think, oh, what's that little scalloped little black gap?
So with a dowel plate sized to 32 of an inch, would you maybe, if you were doing a 3/16 hole, would you maybe oversize it of a 32nd to be fully certain you're going to get clean?
I don't know. I mean, that's a super good question, because one of my 3/16 drill bits during the last class I taught in Indiana got a little wonky, and it was drilling a hole, which was a little bit big, because like we were putting the dowels through the dowel plate and pinning drawer sides, his rabbeted drawer sides with the dowels, and the dowels were like looser. It's like, that's crazy, because these dowel plates are awesome. I got my drill bit and I sort of rolled it on my joiner table, and it was like clunk clunk. It's like, okay, how do you bend a drill bit? I don't know, but it got bent. So, but that
probably
was
12 students using it back to back and overheating.
So that was a situation where, to your point, if you get a little wonky drill bit and it's wandering a little bit, that extra 30-second dowel, tighten you right back up. Yeah. DFM. Greatest dowel plate ever.
I like it, because I
thought that was an acronym for something else.
Me too. Like, whoa.
Damn. No, let's not go there.
That's what was appealing to me about the 30 seconds is I do the intermediary steps, because I have no good way to cut 1/4-inch or.
Oh,
like I'm not doing that by hand. That's exhausting.
Yeah.
So I like going big and then going down, and that's also exhausting. But it's not.
I'm just exhausted. Well, my all-time favorite tool of all time for this week is a Delta bandsaw.
that you don't own.
That Barry and I found at the flea market, and neither one of us bought. And it's
You're the most honest person I know, because I tucked that shame way in the back. No one to know about.
It was like an old 50s 2-speed Delta, just like Jeff has one in his basement. And it was $110. And I implore all of the fine listeners of Shop Talk Live, don't make the mistake that Barry and I did. We walked up to this bandsaw, and we both immediately knew that one of us needed to buy it. Barry talked himself out of the equation pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I said I was going to buy it and went back to buy it, and it was gone. And it hurts. That's like my dream bandsaw.
But the seller knew he wanted it gone.
Yeah.
Like he knew he was underpricing it, and he knew exactly how to get it out of there.
Awful.
I was clear I was backing out, because I was on the fence, and then it became clear as I was talking to him that I was not going to do it. And he said, well, I do metal sculpture, and it's probably like I can use the wheels for that and the door for this thing. And he just saw the color leave my face. He goes, I know, buddy, but it's what's going to happen if you don't buy it. And it was just like the puppy at the window. Oh, it was rough.
And it didn't sting that day, but it's just growing. The shame is growing and growing. But my actual all-time favorite tool of all time for this week is my homemade hot pipe bender.
Cool.
Oh, nice.
It's a 100-watt bulb in a piece of pipe.
Oh, you don't have the blowtorch going in there.
No, I have a 100-watt bulb in a piece of pipe.
That's very civilized.
And you just plug it in. You know what is awful, though, is anytime I mention it to older woodworkers, they're like, well, I just use a blowtorch. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't want to. And they're like, huh. And it's like, I have been judged for not wanting to have an open flame in my shop. But the thing that I love about it is I don't have to set anything up. I just put it in my vise, plug it in, wait 5 minutes. It's, beads of water sizzling off the top of it, 400 degrees.
Oh, man.
Wow,
And-
light bulb does that?
Right?
Yeah. Now, the picture that I have here, I've
It's like a
modified
little
it
Christmas
a little
light. I don't want those on my Christmas tree.
It's a 100-watt tube light that was hard to find. I had to order it from some specialty store. But now I just have a piece of 1.25-inch pipe, black pipe, and some steel wool jammed in it in the end. What? Just to keep the heat from coming out the end. It's not anywhere near the bulb or anything like that. It's totally safe.
I use asbestos. It's much better.
Torch that.
But it's just so nice to be able to, I need to bend this piece, plug it in, go, you know, and not have to set up, am I out of propane? Do I have the little lighter thing? I don't know. I love bending wood now. It's so much fun.
That's cool.
Yeah. But
So if you're bending wood, you're doing one of three things. You're making shaker oval boxes, you're making line and bury inlay, or you're making instruments.
or you're making Windsor chairs or something.
With the piping?
Well, no. Yeah.
I don't know.
So, I don't know. With instruments, it's like there's not a straight piece of wood on there.
Right, yeah.
Everything is all over the place. So,
Cool.
Yeah. You bend a lot of wood when making instruments. All right. Take a break.
Sure.
All right.
I'll allow it.
All of you, our listeners, have different skill levels, woodworking interests, design aesthetics, makers you admire, workshops, tools, and projects unique to you. The aspects that join this community together are a shared love of the craft, the smell of the workshop, the challenge of perfection, and the chance to create something beautiful. That's why we introduced Fine Woodworking Unlimited, our new membership that gives you access to over 43 years of our content designed to help teach, inspire, and connect with you. Unlimited members have access to everything fine woodworking, including our complete online archive, over 55 video workshops, and our iconic magazine delivered right to your door. No matter where you are on your journey today, Unlimited has something to inspire your next step. To learn more, go to finewoodworking.com/unlimited.
Your students were in class hammering between the holes on the 16th inch or on a 16th inch dowel plate. That takes forever.
I just chamfer the corners of the dowel and then just like jam it through the hole. I taper each end a little pencil sharpener and just like pound it through.
Yeah, but aren't we talking about one or two extra dips?
It's a lot of friggin' work. So I buy the straightest dowels I can find from the store. Mm-hmm. And if it's a 1/4 inch, I'll punch it through the 1/4 inch hole just to make sure. Okay. And then I'll go to the 3/16, and that's, or is it, I start, anyway, that hole after the first one, it's so much work. And it seems to be more work as you go down.
Oh, sure. Because if you remove the entire
stock. But it's like if I need to remove an eighth, let's say, that second 16th pass feels like I'm moving an eighth compared to that first 16th inch pass. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would get a block plane. I'd still do flats all the way around, get as much off there as I could.
Yeah.
Do they come out straight or they come out like a little wonky?
They come out mostly straight. If they're wonky, I toss them because I'm draw boring.
I'm surprised you don't rive your stock. I'm surprised you use dowel stock.
I am too. I'm surprised you don't rive.
I don't have
like
enough
you're the guy who would rive
straight
it.
stock on hand. You know? So like I just have offcuts from 1/4 inch lumber that I've used. But so
See,
I
this is what we need to be doing with our scrap.
Riving.
Well, giving it to Barry to rive.
But I don't want to rely on that. I wanted like a reliable, like I can go to Lowe's and get the dowels rather than, oh crap, do I have any straight grain offcuts that are long enough?
Okay.
Do you need any scrap of wood? I got a bunch.
That's the saddest question anyone has ever asked me.
Do you need my garbage?
I was going to burn it, but it's cut to exact length, so it might be good. I don't know.
All right. Question number 3 is from Rob Go Slow on YouTube. I love that name, Rob Go Slow. All right, first off, I'm not sure where to submit questions for the podcast, but I have one. Rob goes slow. Go slowly through every outro of this podcast. Because I give the email address. Every single one. Also have reason to believe that people aren't listening to the intros either, and there's really good information in there.
Well, how we get the question? Because you got it where it needs to go.
Because I'm a kind person, and I copied and pasted it from YouTube.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
And emailed it to myself. That's the part that might not happen if you leave a YouTube comment. It might not get emailed to myself.
Oh, cool.
So
Don't you hate it when you email yourself a reminder and then like bing, and then you get super excited because it's like you have mail?
He's talking to me, yeah.
we have an internal email address that if you send it to an email address, it goes to everybody on staff. And every single time I send something to everybody in the Fine Woodworking staff, I immediately like, ooh, an email. All right. I'm a very new woodworker with a low-end contractor table saw. Obviously, things like blade angle and fence are not very precise, but I want to know what sources of error I should be looking out for. What are you concerned about with a cheap table saw? So, Rob?
I mean, one of the biggest deal breakers is run out on your arbor, meaning is your blade spinning true or is it wobbling a lot? And it's kind of a hard thing to fix if there's something wrong with it. But let's say your blade is spinning okay. It's really a matter of alignment, and it's really not anything that you can't handle yourself, and that your blade needs to be aligned parallel to your miter gauge slots. That's step one. And you got to sort of figure out how you can adjust your table parallel with your blade and find a way to check that it is parallel. We've done a bunch of articles on table saw tune-up. And then you need to make sure that your fence is in line with your miter gauge slots. So that's kind of it. Your blade has to be parallel to the slots. Now you can use the slots to make sure your fence is parallel. Those things are all good. It's fine.
Yeah, you might have the 1 in a million cheap contractor table saw that everything is lined up, and there's nothing wrong with it then. But it's the aligning that's going to be really, really difficult.
Yeah. So one thing is if you have a kind of a cheap fence that doesn't stay square, you can't get it square, or it moves or it flexes too much, contractor saws, there's a lot of aftermarket fences you can bolt onto a contractor. Now, we're talking contractor saw, the one with the open stand, not a benchtop job site saw.
I wonder if he's talking a benchtop job site saw. Low-end contractor table saw.
Okay. Yeah, because traditionally contractor saw, it's a regular size table saw, 10-inch blade. It just has kind of like 4 legs instead of a cabinet.
Yeah.
And the
motor hanging out the back.
Yeah,
still belt-driven.
Yep. But your trunnions are attached to the table as opposed to the cabinet.
Trunnions are what the mechanism hangs off of, basically.
Right. The part that lets you go up and down and tilt side to side.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if you can't get it to where you're taking a cut, like without a lot of stress, safely, without it burning, and make sure, throw a good blade on there. It doesn't have to be an expensive blade. Get yourself a new $30 blade or something like that. Because even a lower quality blade, if it's brand new and it's sharp, it's still going to cut really well. So make sure you got a good blade. Try to get everything as lined up as possible. And you should be able to get that blade lined up 90 degrees to the tabletop itself. If I can't get to 90, or if I can't get things parallel, or if my fence is moving around and I can't get an aftermarket fence, I don't think I'd be using that tool. I think that's kind of scary.
I had, for a long time, like a, $150 table saw that you would buy at a home center. And it became very, very frustrating the more I used it. There's a couple of things that I was never able to fix. And that's why I wound up getting a different table saw. First off, one problem with any benchtop saw is going to be making a zero clearance or something similar insert plate, throat plate. The tops are so thin that you can't make a piece of metal or you can't make a piece of wood that would fit in that throat plate thin enough to sit inside the top.
Right.
The other thing that I had an issue with, I was never able to get the miter slot parallel to the blade.
Okay.
And the miter slot was way too short.
Oh, sure. Okay.
So unless you were cross-cutting a 6-inch piece of wood, you were already the miter gauge was already off the tabletop before you were doing it. So any benchtop table saw, I say keep it for contractor use, keep it for whatever you need, but I would much sooner do everything I needed to do on something other than a table saw.
That's where my brain went, because I've been lucky enough where I've only worked on at least a hybrid saw, but almost always cabinet saws. And I was wondering about workarounds. Like, what else, if this is what he has and he can't afford a bigger, better saw, like, are you trying to incorporate a router table more? Are you turning to the bandsaw and just getting good with hand planes?
A circular saw and a
chop
decent
saw.
Guide.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good ways of replacing a table saw.
Yep.
That doesn't, a table saw that's that endless debate. It was like, can you replace a table saw with a track saw? It's like, yeah, you can, but it's just not very efficient.
Yeah.
But if it's to me a track saw or an unsafe table saw,
right?
I'm using track saw any day of the week. A router with some guide bushings and some shop-made jigs, you can do a lot of things with a skill saw and a router and a chop saw.
Yep.
Don't let the table saw be a source of frustration. There's other ways of doing just about everything.
A lot of good workarounds to a saw which is not doing what you want it to do. You're probably better off not using it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My brother had like a 50s, or it might have been from the 70s or whatever, just like an old contractor saw. But again, it was the throat plate issue. And, he can't use a dado stack. He can't, set up a zero clearance throat plate. If you can't set up a zero clearance throat plate, it's hard to make a shop-made splitter for it. Mm-hmm. It was one of those things where it was better for him to, find a Craigslist, Delta that we were able to work with.
A lot of good table saws on the market, used table saws. I mean, it used to be the Delta Unisaw was the industry standard 10-inch saw in the home shop, and you could never, ever find those for sale used anywhere because people kept them forever. A lot of people, including myself and a lot of people I know, have upgraded to a saw stop because they decided, okay, my luck is running out. I don't want to cut my fingers off. And so there's just a ton of really good quality table saws on the market for not a lot of money because of that.
Yeah.
So not a bad way to go. You just got to make sure you know enough to know what you're looking for to make sure you're getting something decent.
Yeah.
Cool.
Question number 4 is from, I love this, Captain Zachary J. Daniels. This man is in charge of a ship in the United States Navy, and here he is asking us questions about hand planes. I generally feel as though I come up lacking, but right now I'm about to really come up lacking. All right. I want to buy a block plane from Lee Nielsen. I know Mike is a fan of the adjustable mouth block plane. However, I also remember Mike and Matt having a spirited debate where Matt was extolling the virtues of a rabbeting block plane. I can't seem to find that original discussion. Instead of listening to the entire catalog once again, and without Matt around to defend himself, I'm adding that in, I'm interested in hearing Mike's opinion on why he prefers the adjustable mouth block plane over the rabbeting block plane. Right now, I want to buy one block plane, and I also have my eyes on a number 62 low-angle jack. Thanks for the show. Keep up the great work. I became an unlimited member after listening to several of the podcasts.
Cool.
Dang.
So yeah, send that on to the boss.
I mean, the little routing block plane, it's a cool little plane. It's kind of nice. Like if you gave me one, I'm looking at Barry. Like if you gave me one, I'd be like,
yeah, if I gave you one, yeah,
I'd be super happy. The only problem I have with it is that if you buy that with the idea being that it's going to work as two different tools, a block plane and say like a shoulder plane or something for trimming tenons, I think you're kind of stuck in the middle, and you end up, I don't know. I think you're ending up with a tool that you're always sort of using not for its intended purpose, I guess. And when I'm trimming tenons, when I've used it, it's kind of a low profile plane. So my knuckles always like bang the fence of my shooting board whenever I was using it to like clean up tenons. So I think, ideally just a regular low angle block plane and a shoulder plane. I think you're going to want to get there at some point. But if you start with a block rabbet plane, it can kind of handle a lot of things for you. You're probably going to end up still getting a block plane and probably still a shoulder plane, and then you're going to have a block rabbet plane. I don't know that it's that bad to have all three. I just wouldn't want to have one. Because I have a block plane and a shoulder plane and then a bunch of old Stanley rabbet planes like the 78, which are super cheap. Those things work really well for trimming tenon cheeks because they're really, really wide. I don't own a block rabbet plane, but maybe for like, wide panel bevels or something like that, it would be cool to have one, I think.
So here's my question. How about the jackrabbit plane? Have you seen, because he said he'd like to low angle jack, and they have it in a rabbet form where the blade is the whole length of the body.
Yeah.
Because to me, I think large tenons with that block rabbet plane. And if what did he said? He's doing a Morris chair. If he's working with big tenons, or do you think that's the same? Do you think a jackrabbit is the same kind of two almost full tools instead of one full tool?
I'm not going to call this a tool bomb because in no way is it a tool bomb. But I own a Lee Nielsen, what is it? Is it the carriage maker plane?
Yeah.
It's the plane with the full width iron, exactly what you're talking about. I've owned it for a really long time. I've never used it.
Get out.
Yeah.
You got to do more timber frame.
Well, I thought I'm going to use it for like raising the panels on my drawer bottoms, on the bottom of drawer bottoms.
Do you bevel your drawer bottoms?
Yeah. It's like, no, I'm not going to get it out for that. I just don't do raised panel work. I would probably want to use it for that. I don't know. I don't know. So I don't know if that would be the answer.
All right.
So for the record, a rabbet block plane from Lee Nielsen is $175. The adjustable mouth is $165. So with $10 difference. How often do you adjust the mouth on your block plane?
Enough to want to be able to do it.
That's an answer.
So I'd say at least 4 times during the course of making a single project.
Okay. That's a significant amount, actually.
Because like for end grain, you want your blade super, super fine cut because it's going to chatter. Okay. And you want to close that throat up super, super tight so you're not bonking it on a corner that you're trying to plane. And then heavier cut, when you're doing bevels along an edge, you got to open it up. And then if you're doing like a really heavy pyramid chamfer where you just want to sort of blow off the stock, you got to open up the throat quite a bit to get a heavier blade cut and then back it up. So yeah, move around a little bit.
So I had the same thought too about if I had the choice between a rabbet block plane and a shoulder plane, I would get the rabbet block. Or I'm sorry, I would get the shoulder plane. Mm-hmm. No ifs, ifs, or buts. A shoulder plane, you can trim shoulders, you can trim tenons, you can trim anything.
Yeah.
Rabbet block plane, you can't because it's only you're not gonna trim shoulders.
You're doing tenon
with a rabbet block
but you're
plane.
doing tenon cheeks.
Yeah.
You must have a way to size your tenon cheeks. And that block rabbet plane, if you can only get one block plane, that's going to tackle that job for you. Because how much is a big fat Lee Nielsen shoulder plane? That
$2 and change, I think, right? Like they start at $250.
$300 now.
It's on the, I think, the north end of the 200s.
Yeah. So, like I said, if I'm just getting a plane, can I get by with a block rabbet plane as a block plane and as a plane to true my tenons? Yeah, you can.
Uh-huh.
Definitely.
Yeah, like if you had to pick one adjustable mouth block plane or the block rabbet and you don't have a shoulder plane.
I go block rabbet, and my next small plane after that would be the adjustable mouth.
Okay.
So then my block rabbet goes from this general use plane to strictly it's a tenon sizing maestro, and it just lives just for that. And then I can just beat up my block plane as much as I want, do all the kind of stuff for it.
Uh-huh.
Get out my block rabbet. The blade is really sharp. It's set for the right cut. It's aligned perfectly with the edges of the sole, so I can pick it up, zip, my tenons fit, and I'm happy.
All right.
Well, and one other thing that we didn't read this part is that he has tuned up and refurbished Stanleys before. To me, get an old Stanley 60.5 and tune it up. That can be had for what, $30?
Is that the adjustable mouth one?
Yeah.
I'd get the Lee Nielsen low angle, and then get yourself a Stanley 78, 190. There's a whole bunch of basically rabbeting planes with a full width blade, which do a really good job on tenons.
Do you really? I've never had success using my 78 for sizing a tenon.
Mainly is you want to clamp the stock in the vise because it's a two-handed plane.
Okay.
And you got to get both hands on there, and you got to keep the weight, downward pressure right over the blade. But they work really well.
I've always just tried to use it like a one-handed shoulder plane.
Yeah, no.
And it just
it's a different animal. Nope.
Okay. All right, I'll have to try that.
And Will Neptune told me that, and so it works.
While I was digging up information for this question, I came across it's an article in issue 128 back in 1997 of Garrett Hack talking about shoulder planes and rabbet planes, and it is the absolute best photo that's ever been in a fine woodworking.
Oh.
If this is not an advertisement for woodworking, I don't know what is. So we will post. I'll post that on Instagram.
Yeah,
and
it's an advertisement for something.
I want Goddard's wax tins. If I've gotten anything out of this job, it's that I want those old tins of Goddard's wax, because I think that's what makes you a good woodworker. Because every good woodworker I've seen has those tins. It's Goddard's, right? That lemon scented metal one.
Yes.
Oh, there's a Goddard's tin in the picture.
Dude,
that's why you brought this up. Okay.
I covet that. Oh, yeah, sorry. Not everyone can see the photo because it's a podcast. My bad. I covet those.
I might be able to get you 10.
What? I'm able to get you a free black rabbit plane.
All right. So we had a couple of 5-star reviews on iTunes. First one was from Patrick G. I've been listening to Shop Talk Live for years now, and the best part is that it inspires me to get into the shop regularly. It's like spending an hour with fellow woodworkers, which is important to keep going in such a solitary pursuit. Mike, Ben, Anissa, and their rotating cast of keeps it fun while sharing great pro tips, and they make everything from basics to more esoteric topics approachable. There's only one element I'd like to see improved, and it is a complete knit. Ben, you can do better with the tinny loop under the add section. See, I made it like sound like a little Casio keyboard on purpose. That was a creative decision, Patrick.
Someone doesn't like your decisions. I think is what he's saying.
I get more emails about like music stuff in the podcast than any other podcast.
So Barry, you cool just being referred to as a rotating cast?
Yeah, I mean, I'll handle it. I'm the new guy. I figure that's just part of the shtick. You know?
Next one is from Thomas. This is a great podcast. I have a stupid long commute, 1.5 hours, and I love listening to Shop Talk Live as I drive. I always wanted to get into woodworking, but I've never had anyone to show me how to do anything. This podcast has helped me learn the language of the shop and figure out how to get started.
Cool. Right on.
Pretty good one.
Yeah.
All right. Anybody have any recommendations?
No. I don't think so.
Said with authority. My recommendation I already used up. It was to be that thing at the flea market, or is to buy that thing at the flea market when you know you should buy it.
Just buy that thing at the flea market.
Buy it.
Yeah. Great. I'm going to double down on that one.
All right. All right. That's all for this episode of Shop Talk Live. If you have questions you'd like us to answer on the show, send them into shoptalk@taunton.com.
I have one. Read a Toni Morrison book. She passed away today, and that sucks.
I've never read a Toni Morrison
What'd you
book.
recommend?
Yeah. Do you need to come
Maybe
back?
do interviews. Maybe start with an interview or two so you get Toni Morrison a little better. But Beloved is classic, and it will wreck you. Like it just leaves you in a puddle on the floor, but it's incredible.
Wow, that's not why I read
I don't know if I need that.
It's like don't read it in public. Maybe don't bring it onto a plane because you'll be a wreck. But she's incredible.
Cool.
Was incredible.
All right. If you're watching on YouTube, click that thumbs up button. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. Thanks for listening. Is Barry hot?
Barry's hot.
A little too hot. Oh, what's that?
Hot stuff.
Hot stuff. Thanks. Trying to get some James Brown going.
In the hot tub.
In the hot tub. It's too hot. One toe at a time.
We'll do it. Ow! Too hot.
One toe at a time.